Drawing down the moon. Look at the image here. This is the cover of the book by Radcliffe Edmonds III. You'll notice that he is pulling that. You see that there are two figures. They are interacting with the moon. One is pushing it, one is pulling it away. There's a flow of water, there's implements, yada, 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 yada. Okay, have you heard of this statement, drawing down the moon, before? Well, you might have, especially if you're in the neo-pagan world at all. The title of this rite, Drawing Down the Moon, and ritual may sound familiar. There's a modern neo-pagan Wicca book by Margot Adler. It's really important, called 1979, or that was written in 1979. That's called Drawing Down the Moon. There, she explained this in a radio interview. In this ritual, the ritual of drawing down the moon, one of the most serious and beautiful in the modern craft, the priest invokes into the priestess, or depending on your point of view, she evokes from within herself, the goddess or triple goddess, symbolized by the phases of the moon. She is known by 1,000 names, and among them were those I had used as a child. In some craft rituals, the priestess goes into a trance and speaks. In other traditions, the ritual is a more formal, dramatic dialogue, often of intense beauty, in which, again, the priestess speaks, taking the role of the goddess. In both instances, the priestess functions as the goddess incarnate within the circle. Now, this ritual was inspired by the same materials that Radcliffe Edmonds is perusing in his book on the Greco-Roman world. But Adler is a practitioner. She's a modern practitioner of witchcraft, looking to repurpose old rituals to a new practice. This is very common in neo-paganism. I see it all the time. Radcliffe Edmonds is trying to understand the phenomenology and social structures around these works in the Greco-Roman world, though with an eye to make greater claims about the nature of magic. So what is drawing down the moon? We read Radcliffe Edmonds, translation from Ovid. She strives with the reluctant moon to hang it down from its course in the skies, and makes hide away in shadows the steeds of the sun. She reins the waters in, and stays the downwinding stream. She charms life into trees and rocks, and moves them from their place. Among sepulchres, a sepulcher is a place that holds a body or a graven site. Among sepulchres she stalks, ungirded, with her hair flowing loose, and gathers from the yet warm funeral pyre the appointed bones. She vows to their doom the absent, fashions the waxen image, and into its wretched heart drives the slender needle, and other deeds 'twere better not to know. So, drawing down the moon, according to Ovid, a prominent writer, was scary, a thing done by women, a thing done by women outside of society. And by drawing the power of the moon, they could affect changes in the world. Edmonds also tells a story out of Socrates in which someone suggests that a witch could be gathered to draw down the moon and put it in a box. That way, this guy who has too many debts and he has to pay them off by the next moon would never have to pay them off because the moon wouldn't rise again because the moon's in a box. And at that point, they kind of joke about the whole thing. The point about this being a joke is that it shows that these rites of drawing down the moon and harnessing the power of the moon were well known and produced anxiety among the Greco-Romans. So Edmonds defines magic in the Greco-Roman world here, which really attends to what we were talking about with Hubert Emmaus. Magic is a discourse pertaining to non-normative ritualized activity. Non-normative ritualized activity. Focus on that. In which the deviation from the norm, from the normal way of doing things, is most often marked in terms of the perceived efficacy of the act, the familiarity of the performance within the tradition, the ends for which it is performed, and the social location of the performer. So how do we tell that this is a magic act as opposed to a religious act? The type of efficacy, the way that it changes the world, the familiarity of the performance. Is there a tradition of using this type of magic that's known throughout a culture? The ends for which it performed, such as pragmatic as opposed to transcendental ends, or the social location of the performer, i.e. the magician, the one who is outside of society, but affecting society. So keep in mind this notion of non-normative. Non-normative social locations of the performers, women, underclass people, whatever. Non-normative ends. These are not the specific ways that the universe usually works. The weirdness of it all, just when you look at a Catholic mass, you go, okay, I can kind of see this. But when you start reading a bunch of magic rituals, the one thing you notice is they're weird, they're odd, they're inversions, they're transgressions, they're strange. And one way to really know magic when you see it is to look at its elements of high weirdness that occurs. Also, that it has an extreme power. So there's this joke that I told you about, this witch conjuring the drawing down the moon in order to help the guy get away from his debts. Well, here it's about women. And even if you look back here, notice how female it is. It shows you the ambivalent position of these female magicians in the discourse. You also notice it's performed in tombs by sepulchres. So there's all sorts of kind of kookiness that comes on. Magic is weird. So there are rare cases in which, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. Yeah. So what I want you to do is also think a little bit that drawing down the moon is non-normative. And when you think about a non-normative thing, you got to wonder, well, who it's non-normative for? So the practitioner, someone who practices magic, is going to be different from the polemicist, the one who's writing to deny magic's reality or to argue that it is evil. This will tell you a lot of things. I mean, I wonder if when I'm performing rituals that are non-normative, when I do them, they feel normative to me. So what's it non-normative in relation to? And that would be to sort of a mainstream society, the traditions that have been handed down to us. So this overlaps with something I mentioned a few times before, is the discourse of inclusion and the discourse of exclusion. So when you're looking at any magic material, you want to ask yourself, is this being written to say magic is not real, or it's bad, or it's prohibited, or to say that this is an okay thing that people do? And how can you tell if something is going to be inclusive? Well, usually if someone will refer to themselves as a magician or as a witch, then they are going to self-label. And if they are self-labeling themselves as performing magic, then it will be the discourse of inclusion. All right, what are our takeaways? How are magic and religion differently related to society and social structure? Think about the different ways you see religion operating in a Catholic mass or a Christian church, or in any time people talk about religion when you meet them in the world, versus how magic is talked about in secret, in a different type of society, inverting society, changing society through non-normal ways. How is magic non-normative? What is the relationship between authority and normativity? Magic is non-normative because it shows a new way to do things, an individual way to do things, an individual's power to do things. And in that, the normal way can be marshaled by the Catholic priest. He can use the normal way to gain power, but the lowly magician cannot. The lowly magician doesn't have the apparatus of the church. The lowly magician has something else, the magic book, the actions done in secret. So this also says, who are the authorities? For the Catholic priest, the church, the Bible, progression of the saints, Jesus Christ, blah, blah, blah. The magician, spell book, effects of rituals in the past, prior magicians they have known who have been affected. All right, so what is the advantage of looking at the social position of magic practitioners versus just the mechanics of the ritual? This is where I'm saying, when you start looking at magic, don't just look to see what people do. Look to see which people are doing it. And magic traditionally is practiced by outsiders, by non-mainstream groups. So one would have to argue, if one performs a magical act so regularly that it's accepted, then it would probably become normative, even if it's really different from what came before it. So what I want you to just kick around is, who are the people that are doing magic? Why are they doing magic? And how are they doing magic? And what is the social position of those people doing magic? All right, I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye now.